Kyle, it's not good enough to just be a real estate salesperson. It's not good enough to just have your license, especially as times are getting tougher. Would you agree?
Sure.
Sure. And so what I want you to talk about is how can a real estate agent that's listening to this, how can they differentiate themselves? How can they make themselves stand out above the crowd, especially for listings?
Yeah, I think we all want a lot of listings, right? Like listings, leads, leverage. Those are like the three things from the old Red Book back in the day that we all want to have. I want to share some specific strategies. I don't always share the things I share with the team, but I just felt compelled to share some of these strategies with you guys today of the things you need to do when setting listing appointments to separate yourself from the competition, to massively increase your win rate, to massively increase your conversion percentage on these listing appointments you're setting for yourself. So that's what we're gonna cover today on the Whissel Way podcast. My name is Kyle Whissel, your host with eXp Realty in San Diego.
And I'm Bryan Koci.
The goal of the show is to give you the tools, techniques, and tactics to go out there and crush it in your business. The way that we like to do that is to answer the questions that you have for us. So if you ever have a question you want to have us answer on the show, you can always go to thewhisselway.com. You can ask us questions on there, subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel, join our referral network for all the people leaving California, and you can subscribe to our email newsletter and get in our private Facebook group where we share more tips and tricks of what we're doing here on our team. Lastly, if you're looking to level up your content creation game, whether that be audio, video, or social, you can do all of that on thewhisselway.com and check out the Media Mayor Mastermind course while you're there.
I think I stole your widget, and I'm glad I'm going to go first.
You don't know my widget.
Okay, good. Then my widget's my widget. So, okay, first thing, how do you separate yourself when showing up to a listing? Like, when does it start?
Yeah, so there's like a series of questions that I think that you can ask that are going to position you to win. The first question is one that gets asked between the time period of when you set the appointment and when you show up to the appointment. And this is a very simple question. You should use this in all aspects of business. So you can use this on a listing appointment. You can use this, hopefully you're going on more buyer appointments now, right? Where you actually have to convince somebody to work with you versus your competition. So this is a question you can ask there. We've been working with a lot of developers lately. We just landed a 68 unit development. We have a 32 unit development. So we're landing a lot of that. This question works in all of those scenarios, and it's very, very simple. What's important to you about the agent you choose to represent you? Write this one down. Grab a pen, grab a paper, load your notes app. What's important to you about the agent you choose to represent you? You want to ask that question before the listing appointment. You want to ask it before the day of the appointment. You want to ask it as soon as the appointment's set. What's most important to you about the agent you choose to represent you? That way, you have some clear direction of where to go when you show up at that appointment. If you don't ask that question in advance, you're going into that appointment blindly. You have no idea where to go. So now you're just kind of like a radar that's just like bouncing around, and like you show up at the appointment and like hopefully you hit and you're like, okay, that's the way I'm gonna go. But if I ask in advance, instead of bouncing all around, I already know that's the way to go. The seller already told me in advance before I showed up that day. And now what's important to them? Maybe it's marketing. Maybe it's your track record. Maybe it's how you compare to agent X, Y, and Z. Whatever it is, that one is actually really important. If you have somebody who's like a data freak and they want to know how you compare to other agents, you need to know that information more than right before the appointment, because it might take you a little time to compile that information. So we got to ask that question as soon as we set the appointment. I'll say, hey, Brian, great. I'm all set for Tuesday at 2 o'clock with you. Last question before we leave, Brian, because I want to make sure that I make our time together valuable on Tuesday. What's most important to you about the agent you choose to represent you? That's my last question. And then he'll tell me that information, and now I have the exact path to go down when I show up to the appointment.
So you do that before you show up to the appointment. What else do you do before you show up to the appointment?
Yeah, the other thing before the appointment is we work with a company called HighNote. Mark over there, great guy. So HighNote is a product that we utilize that we use to send out our pre-listing package. So that HighNote, what it ultimately does, instead of sending this like big long email with like 26 different links in it, and it's just really hard for people to consume, it breaks it into little sections that become a lot more palatable. There'll be an image for each section, a little description, and then a button for them to click to get more information. So each section, that could be a link to your Zillow reviews. That could be a link to a video talking more about who you are. That could be a link to a CMA or to market stats. Yes, I'm telling you all the things that are part of our package. A link to a 3D tour, a link to a floor plan, a link to a listing agreement, all the different things that you think would be important to put in front of a seller before you go and meet with them. And so we send this information over and just say, hey, Bryan, I'm just... we just finished up our call. I'm super excited to meet with you Tuesday at 2 o'clock. I have a little bit of information that I'd like for you to review before we meet on Tuesday that's going to tell you a little bit more about me and my team and some of our marketing strategies. So that way, when we get together on Tuesday, we can focus on you, your goals, and put a plan in place to help you accomplish them. And I'm going to send that over to Bryan. And now what's going to happen is that HighNote has multiple sections in it. What's great about HighNote, it's going to tell me when did Bryan open it, or if Bryan didn't open it, it's going to tell me. If Bryan didn't open it, that's a cue for me to follow up and say, hey, Bryan, just again, I want to make sure you got this information. Real important that you review that before we get together Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Here's a link to it. So I can remind Bryan if I know he didn't look at it. If he did look at it, I'm going to get another even more clear path of where to go with Bryan, because I'm going to look at what information within that HighNote did he look at. Did he solely focus on the market data and the comps? Okay, now I got an analytical. Did they focus on our reviews in our team? Okay, maybe I got more of an amiable. Like, I'm gonna get a much better direction of where to go with that person based on, one, the information they told me that's important to them, and two, the information that they spent the most time on when they looked at that HighNote. So that also helps set me up for success so that when I walk in the door, I know what's important to that person. I know the information that they found valuable so far and what they've already looked at. I'm so far ahead of my competition before I even open my mouth.
Now, if someone says that they're going to be interviewing other agents, do you care? Do you want to go first? Do you want to go last? And then do you say, cool, who else are you interviewing? Like, what do you do if they go through that route?
Yeah, so I use a strategy. Nobody's ever taken me up on this, but I say, hey, it sounds like you have two other agents that you're going to be interviewing. Having to sit down for like 3 separate interviews sounds like a lot of work. I'd be okay with it if you would. What if you just had me and the other 2 agents and you just interviewed all 3 of us at the same time? What does that do? It says, I'm confident as fuck. That's what it does. Nobody's ever said yes because they know it would probably be pretty awkward, but I just want them to know how confident I am, that I'm willing to sit there and I'm willing to put it on the table in front of 2 other people because I know I'm the best. I am not intimidated by anybody. It's just a way for me to show some confidence. So I've put that out there. I'm put all my cards on the table. This is who I am. Let's go. So I've done that. Now, they typically will say no, and I say that's fine. When do I want to go? I want to go first. I do not want to go last. I know some people are like, oh, you always go last. You can make a last impression. Bitch, you ain't getting a last impression if I go first, because I'm going to get it signed on the spot. If you're second or third, there's a good likelihood you're not going to get a shot, because I'm going to close them being first up. I'm going to go for the close. If I know they have 2 other people they're going to interview with, I get the first opportunity to say, hey, what would it take for us to move forward right now, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? And they'll be like, well, we have 2 other meetings. Hey, I totally can respect that. How about this? I have a feeling they probably both told you they have buyers, right? Well, yeah, they did. How'd you know? Because they all say that. Here's the deal. What I will do is I'll give them a heads up that, you guys don't need to meet with them. But what I am going to do when I talk to them, I'm going to let them know that we're going to give them first crack at the house because they told you they have buyers. So we'll give them the first crack at it so they can bring those buyers that they have that they really don't have, but those buyers they claim they have, we'll make sure that they get first crack at the house. Does that sound fair? It's a good compromise? Okay, cool. So we'll do that. If I do know I'm interviewing other people, I do try to get the information of who those people are. My degree is in economics. I will pull every chart, every graph, every stat, and I will line up everything and I'll figure out the areas where I outproduce that person. So whether that's a sale price to list price ratio, a days on market, whatever data there is, I'll also look at their marketing, I'll look at their reviews, I'll look at their past sales, I'll look at everything, and I'll find the areas where I excel above that other person. So I do want to know who they're interviewing, and so I have time to gather that information.
And one thing I always tell our agents when they say, well, can't we just go, this one's just going to be really quick, or it's an investor property, can't we just go with cell phone photos? I say, no, absolutely not. One, it's doing a disservice to everyone. But two, I remember you told me this, I don't know, 8 years ago. You're like, yeah, I'll go through and I'll look at their listings. And if they use cell phone photos, I'm going to compare their cell phone photos to my good photos and say, what's a better representation of the house? I was like, oh, that's wicked, Kyle.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's their problem, right? They chose to leave those breadcrumbs behind. That's not my fault. I'm going to put forward the worst that somebody's put out there. So that's where you should just make sure everything you put out there is top notch at all times. You know, we're this 68 unit development, and one of the big reasons I think we're getting this over anybody else, they're like $300 and something thousand condos. Guess what? All the other agents are using freaking cell phone photos, right? We have high quality professional photos, drones, floor plans, 3D tours. Most people aren't doing all that on a $300,000 condo. We are.
Give some context. What's average price point here?
$1 million. So on a $300,000 condo, we're going all out. Videos, photos, drone, floor plan, 3D tour, the whole nine. And now that's turning into 68 listings. Just saying.
All right, so now you use your special phrase, what's important to you about the agent you choose to represent you. You send them the HighNote.
Yep.
You make sure that they look at it, and you look at what they looked at.
Yep.
What else do you do either before or where are you at?
Okay, one last thing before. You need to understand zoning and development potential of homes in your area. For example, here in San Diego, I just bought a duplex and I get to add 19 units in the backyard. Guess what? That duplex was worth more than what I paid for it. I paid for a duplex because that's what it comped as, is a duplex. But as a developer, I would have probably paid $500,000 more for that property because of the potential that that property had based on its location and its zoning and everything. So that seller left a lot of money on the table because their agent was not familiar with zoning and understanding the initiatives they have in place in San Diego right now. They could have marketed that home for a lot more money if they actually understood this. So one of the ways that I like to separate myself from my competition is to actually do that research so that when I walk in there to the seller, especially if I know they've interviewed other agents, I can say, hey, did any of the other agents talk to you about the Complete Communities initiative and the fact that your property falls within that from a zoning perspective? And as soon as they're like, no, they didn't, bye-bye, they're done, right? Like it's over, I win. So I want to understand not only what the property is, but what it can be without like a crazy rezoning and wild stuff, just with like the basic initiatives and rules that are in place in the area. So that's an important thing, is doing a little bit of research to understand what not only is there, but what can be there.
And that's also important, just knowing that when you're representing buyers. So when they're buying a property and you go, hey, just so you know, this duplex could turn into a 19-unit development in your backyard, you cool with that? Like that's something that, because I can very easily see an agent or a homeowner getting pissed because they're like, I just bought this house and now, a friend of mine, Amy, is like, they're building up everywhere around me.
By North Park or something?
I don't know exactly where she is, but she's like, another one's popping up. I'm like, I know what's happening here.
Yes, those are going in everywhere. Okay. With the remaining time, I want to hit a few of the questions I like to ask at the appointment. There's obviously all the normal things, right? One, what initially attracted you to the home? I want to find out, like, what did they like about that home? When they saw it, what was in their head that, like, this is the one, right? What got them to write an offer on that home when they first saw it? Because whatever attracted them to the home, I want to make sure that when I go to close this seller, I'm going to bring that back into the conversation. So if they're like, oh, we loved the size of the yard and the proximity to, ABC school, right? Okay, well, guess what? I'm going to talk about that later on in the presentation when I talk about our marketing plan and what we do, how we're going to highlight that backyard and the proximity to ABC school. So I want to find out what initially attracted you to the home. The next one is, now that you've lived in the home for X years, what's your favorite thing about living here? So it could be like, oh, I love all the community events that they do, or I love the weather, or I love the access to the beach or to the mountains or the hiking trails or whatever, right? Like, I want to know all this stuff. Like, I'm going deeper, right? I'm not just going into the comps and like how much commission, like most of you agents are, like I'm connecting with them. And then the more that I can restate the things that they tell me, the more they're like, oh, this guy's listening, he gets me, like this is my guy, which is what I want them to feel, right? I want them to feel like this guy gets me, because that's the person that they want to hire. So there's that. Another question that I like to ask is, this is one that is really important, right? Rates are very high. They're still 6-7%, somewhere in that range. Is, I know that you've spoken with a few other people. Have any of those people asked you anything about your current mortgage? Have any of those people asked you anything about your current mortgage? And they'll be like, well, no, why? Oh, well, depending on your current mortgage, we might find a way to make your home more attractive to potential buyers, maybe even increase the value of your home. So do you mind if I ask you a couple questions about your mortgage? And now I'm going to find out, do they have a USDA, FHA, or VA mortgage? If they do, it's assumable. Now I need to find out, how much do they owe on it? If they owe $500 and the house is worth $700, that's a very appealing potential there, especially if they owe $500 and they have like a 2.5% rate, and it's worth $700, like a buyer could come in with $200,000 down to cover the spread, and now they get a mortgage at 2.5%, where the other agent didn't ask these questions. They're just gonna put it on the market, and a buyer's gotta come to the table with a new loan that's gonna be at 6.5%. So if I find out that they have a mortgage that's potentially assumable, I can include that in my marketing message, which is gonna help it sell faster and possibly for more money. So if I can ask the questions that the other agents aren't asking, same thing with the development, right? Like if I can bring the development stuff to their attention, the other agents haven't. Now I can bring the assumable mortgage thing to the table and the other agents haven't. Like, I'm winning. You're not beating me. I don't care how good your marketing plan is. I don't care about how pretty you are. I don't care about anything. I'm winning, right? I'm asking the questions that nobody else asked, which is why I get the result nobody else gets.
Why did you stop as I'm writing a note? All right, so those are 3 questions.
I'll hit one last question.
You're only gonna give me 4, you're not gonna give me 5?
There's more in there. What's most important to you? What initially attracted you? Now that you've lived here, the assumable mortgage, that's 4. 5th question. Bryan, what will make this process feel like a success for you? What will make this process feel like a success for you? That's great, right? Like, how do I win with you, Bryan? Like, that matters, right? And now this developer we met with the other day, they're like, we want to be hands-off. Just go do your thing. Great, thank goodness, because other people we work with are not that way. Cool, they want hands-off. Just go do your thing, get the freaking units sold, leave us alone. Bet, like, we'll do that. I want to know what works for you, because now as I go to close, I'm going to now bring in all the things that you told me about what initially attracted you to the home, what do you like about the area. I'm going to bring the zoning thing back into the equation if it's applicable. I'm going to bring the mortgage thing back into the equation if it's applicable. And I'm going to bring in how do I win with you back into the equation. And I'm going to close taking all of that into account, as opposed to like, okay, well, do you want to work with me? Do you want to sign? Like, that's how you're closing. That's how I'm closing. That's why you're losing. That's why I'm winning.
They might be winning. They might not be going up against you.
They're going to win a whole lot more if they ask these 5 questions.
Good.
And set a high note.
Okay, so you asked the questions. Yeah. So, and you mentioned those. That's what you do when you close. Say they don't sign on the spot. I know you said, I'm leaving with the signed listing agreement, but they don't sign for whatever reason. What's the plan then? Yeah,
so I like to actually review a listing agreement with a seller, even if they don't sign with me then. Say, hey, real quick, I know that you're right. If I can't overcome all the objections, they still want to meet another agent or two. Say, I'm sure the other agents will do this too, but let's just go over the agreement real quick. I'll leave a copy of this agreement too, so that after you interview the other agents, if you decide that we're the right team, then you just simply put your signatures here. I'll come back and I'll pick the agreement up. We'll get the ball rolling. And so I'll actually go through the agreement with them and explain it to them in detail, because I want them to understand. Again, I want to do more than what everybody else is doing. So I'll walk them through the agreement so that they feel like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about and he's making sure I understand things. So I like to go through the agreement. And then the second thing is I will pin them down to a follow-up time. If they're not going to sign with me on the spot, I say, okay, Bryan, when should I follow up with you? And then they'll be like, oh, next week. Okay, would Monday next week work? Yeah, Monday's cool. All right, is 2 o'clock good, Bryan? Yeah. Sure. I'm calling you at 2 o'clock, motherfucker. Like that shit, the second the phone hits 2 o'clock, I'm hitting send. Like I'm calling you on the dot. That's important. Also, between the appointment and that 2 o'clock on Monday, I'm sending a video. And then additionally, if there's anything that was like brought up in the meeting that maybe I didn't address or I could go a little bit further, I will message them every day with something. Just something to go a little bit deeper. Hey, Brian, I remember you mentioned X. I took a little bit of time and I did some research and here's what I found regarding it. Boom. Hey, Brian, you mentioned Y. I actually took a drive by that property, Y, that you mentioned, and I took the time to schedule a showing and I walked through the property. Here's a couple of pictures I took that maybe weren't in the listing agreement, but I just wanted you to see those as you were comparing things. Like, I'm doing that.
And so you're doing that via text, and you're going to follow up via
text
call.
or email. Obviously, depends on their preferred method of communication, yeah.
But you're not going to call them every day?
Not until the date that I agreed upon calling them. Because I want to respect the boundary that they've set, but I'm going to still communicate with them. I'm just not going to call them until what we agreed upon. But I'm going to call them right at that exact time. And they're going to be like, dang, you're on it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's what I do. That's why I sell so many homes.
Is there anything else that you need to add?
No, dude. If you guys ask these 5 things plus send a HighNote and do the research on the development potential, like you do those 5 things plus those 2 little bonuses, like you are going to double your freaking conversion percentage on your listings. It's going to freaking happen.
Keep going.
Okay. Oh, Brian's over here writing a bunch. Cool. Yeah, I'll keep going. But that's it, guys. You got to connect with people. You got to make sure they feel like you're their person. You got to ask the questions that other people aren't asking. You got to do the research that other people aren't doing. And you got to go into these appointments not just bouncing all over the place trying to find like where to go with things. Those 2 questions, or the 1 question up front, what's most important to you about the agent you choose to represent you, plus the HighNote takes you from bouncing all over the place here to like, this is where we're going to go when we get together.
Good.
You want to still write some more or no?
Well, I'm just trying to make editing easier.
All right. You got any questions?
No. I like it. I love HighNote. And now that iOS 18 is out and RCS is enabled, which just means Android and iPhone talk together better, now it's a lot easier to send. Because that was also another thing. People go, well, I want to do a video, but if they have an Android, there's lots of excuses, right? If they have an Android, it looks bad, and right? Now
you did it. Your blurry video is better than somebody else's non-existent video.
This is true.
So yeah, let's get it out there. Cool, guys. Well, hopefully you got some value out of this. If you did, if you are watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that thumbs up button. If you have a question, throw it in the comment section. Brian and I personally respond to all of those. And if you want more of our content, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. If you're listening on a podcast platform, if you could write a quick review about us, I don't care if it's like 2 words, but just hit 5-star and write a review. That means the world to us. Also, obviously, subscribe so you get notified whenever we drop new episodes. And before we wrap the show, one of the things we like to do is our Whissel widget of the week. This is something we utilize in our business. It saves us time, makes us more money, or helps us have a little bit more fun. What do you got, Brian?
I said I stole your widget, but I think you did this like a month ago. But anyways, we're getting back into it, and I'm really excited. And it's ManyChat. And so ManyChat is a chatbot option for social media, for Instagram. It works on Facebook too?
I don't think so.
It used to work on Facebook.
Maybe.
It didn't work on Instagram before. Anyways, ManyChat, we're getting back into it to where we'll tell you, comment a keyword below and we'll send you something. We're going to be utilizing a lot more here and a lot more in the business. I think it's $20 a month-ish?
Reasonable, but yeah. Just go look at any of the posts that I've been putting up recently. You'll see that constantly. Like, hey, if you want more information, comment with this, and I'll send it to you. And then it automatically will DM somebody that information. It's really cool. I love that they added in too, like you can preset it up, and then you could say, hey, just on my next post, make this active. So you don't have to post and then go back and select the post. And after the fact, you could say, set it up, and then make this active for the next post I put up, and then you put the post up, and it's great. Okay, so you don't have to backtrack. You used to have to backtrack.
If you're going to do that, just let me know, because as I start posting things, it's going to go.
I set them both up side by side, and I say, yes, yes, done. It's over. Cool. Mine, I was just out in Scottsdale, Arizona for a speaking event last week. If you guys have flown into the Phoenix airport, you probably have seen these. They have driverless cars out there. A company called Waymo, and it's pretty freaking wild. They're all these like Jaguar crossover SUVs, and you order it just like you do an Uber, and that thing shows up, and you get in the back seat, and there is nobody in the front seat, and it drives you to your destination completely driverless. It is a trip. The positive is you don't have to deal with the driver, which Lord knows some of these guys are on the phone watching weird videos, just awkward. Or then you have the ones that want to talk to you when you don't want to talk. They stink. The cars are beat to shit. Like, you have all these things. Or it's like blazing hot in there and you want it cooler, or vice versa. Like, you get to control everything in the Waymo, which is cool. The con is they don't like to be on the freeway. So I pulled up how far this drive was going to be. I had to go sign some loan docs while I was out there, and it was like 15 minutes on the nav, and I get in the Waymo and it was like 35 minutes. So I was like, what the hell? And it was like zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. I was like, get on the damn freeway. And it just wanted to zigzag on all these streets. And there were a couple moments that were a little sus as we were driving around. So you got to have some tolerance if you're going to do that. But if you're like cruising like Old Town Scottsdale, I think it's the ticket. But if you've got a long drive, I don't know if I would take one. But Waymo.
All right.
I know that is not something that you would be very excited about. I know my wife would not be very excited about it.
I mean, it depends. When we were in Miami for the Gary Vee event, every Uber driver we had everyone missed every turn. And so it was like 5 minutes and every drive was like 30. So I probably would have been all right with it there.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, hopefully you guys got some value out of the show today. We appreciate you for tuning in. If you want to stay connected with Bryan and I, follow us on Instagram. I'm at Kyle Whissel. Go ahead.
At Bryan Koci.
Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.